So, Nickita, honestly, I've interviewed about 8 people now, and I'm not just saying this. I've been looking forward to speaking to you. Like, probably you're my favorite one, because having witnessed 3 childbirths, it's been one of the most amazing moments of my life. It was so moving, so touching, so inspirational. I had so much respect for my wife and frankly all women out there. It was kind of scary at times. 2 of our childbirths were actually here in our house, and it was just incredible. And I think we were blessed that we were able to do a lot of it. It was all natural. None of it was medicalised. There was no epidurals, no C-sections. But I feel sad that so many people go down the route of that medicalised system. And as a surgeon, I've become more holistic in my practice. I see the bigger picture. And yes, some people say your scope of practice, foot and ankle. But I think if I'm to treat the foot and ankle, actually I need to treat the whole patient. Mind, body, soul, everything. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a big overlap between what we do. So I'm going to pass the mic over to you. Can you just tell me about yourself and why you're doing what you're doing?
Sure. So my name's Nickita Starck. And
Great name, by the way.
Thank you. I'm the founder of When Push Comes to Shove, and it's the world's only alternative maternity structure. So we provide holistic maternity care in 10 countries, and I train women to become natural birth attendants, and we provide amazing education for parents to be. And we also provide an advocacy service for women and families who have perhaps got on the wrong side of social services for their choices, because we specialise in human rights. So, that's basically in a nutshell what we do.
Well, I love it, because then we can break all that down, if that's okay. So let's start with alternative childbirth system. I've got an idea what that means, but can you just break it down for me? Like, what's alternative about the way you're offering or, giving potential, mothers out there? What kind of different service are you from the one that we already have right now?
So first of all, we don't provide any clinical care whatsoever. We understand that birth is a natural process that will very, very occasionally need medical intervention, not a medical process that happens naturally if you're lucky. It is a physiological process. But unfortunately, childbirth has become very over-medicalised in the last 60 years or so. So what we do is we have trained holistic birth practitioners.
Can we go back to what you mean by over-medicalised?
So pregnancy is almost treated like a disease. It's like a conveyor belt system within the medical structure. So they kind of want the beds full and empty, and then
get out quickly.
Yeah, and everything's about risk, and so obstetrics is the highest form of litigation in the medical system. So they do worry an awful lot about being sued.
Yeah.
And doing the wrong thing. But because of that, because it's a fear-based maternity system, their practice reflects that.
It's very defensive.
It is, yeah. And women, see, midwife is meant to mean with woman, but it doesn't anymore. It means with system. And you almost go through this tick box automation. So you go for the booking an appointment. Are you high risk? Yes, you probably are. I mean, just being over 35 makes you a geriatric mother, and then they think you're at risk of this, that, and the other, or you're labelled too fat or too thin. So women tend to enter the maternity system happy, healthy, excited, and unfortunately, a lot of women will leave downtrodden and traumatised by their birth experience. And it's because things have been medicalised and they've been led to believe that their bodies have failed them. I can explain more in detail a bit later if you like about that, why that happens.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, I remember as a medical student attending childbirth, and oh God, it was, the midwives weren't very nice to the medical students. They wanted to train all the other midwives. So we got all the first what's it called? Prems or first pregnancy?
Prime.
That's it. And we had to wait long into the night. And I just remember, the pregnancies I saw. They came in and they were given something to speed them along. I've forgotten what it's called.
Well, what was it? An injection of an IV?
Yes.
Syntocinon.
That's it. They were given something to speed the pregnancy. Then it was failure to progress. So then they were doing a cesarean, and there was too much pain. So they did an epidural. And then the pregnant woman was getting tired and fatigued. And then there was something about the baby
going into
distress. And then they were being ruled in and getting a cesarean section. And, I think like that was, as a med student, I saw 3 of those. I only saw 1 natural like birth, and I saw 3 cesarean sections. And I was like, oh, wow, it's crazy. Because I was expecting to catch a baby, deliver a baby, but I only did that once. It was watching 3 cesarean sections, which was quite bloody, and it was quite horrific actually. So yeah, that's what I saw. It was almost predictable. You kind of saw it happening, and women were in pain, wanted an epidural, screaming for it. And it was quite, I have to admit, I was traumatized. I was like, oh my God, ow. So that's what I saw. But yeah, I think there's this idea that when you have a baby and you're delivering it, from all the movies you see, natural birth, it's painful, they're agony, they're screaming. And tell me, what people have been on this planet for, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years, giving birth, clearly not in hospitals and with epidurals and C-sections. Were just a lot of people just dying? Or, has modern healthcare provided a safer environment for women and this is the best way? Or are we messing up with the normal physiological process?
It's a combination of quite a few things. So I think in order to understand what's gone wrong, I need to first explain how the physiological process occurs.
That would be great. Yeah. Break it down for me.
Sure. So we have the main hormone involved in childbirth is called oxytocin. It's a love hormone. Like if you just stroke your arm like this can stimulate oxytocin.
That's why I like being stroked.
Yeah, it's a love hormone. It's beautiful.
It is.
And babies are made in love and born in love. So when you have sex, you release oxytocin. Now, hey, here's a good example. Now imagine you're making love with your partner and you're in a nice dimly lit room and you're in a beautiful moment, a gorgeous embrace. And then someone whacks open the door, turns the lights on and starts staring at you saying, oh, I think you can reach climax, but probably not. I'm just being here.
Some people are into that, not me.
Well, I think the majority of people would struggle to get back into that moment.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Because here's the thing, when you're in labor, when you're releasing oxytocin, so oxytocin facilitates the rest of your birth, the contractions, it sends all the lovely oxygenated blood to the uterus. But if you're frightened, you release adrenaline, and adrenaline will stop oxytocin in its tracks.
Yeah.
So we have this for a reason. We've evolved it. So imagine you were on the tundra a few thousand years ago and you see a big, scary, bitey, toothy animal and you're about to go into labor. Your body goes, don't do it. It's not safe.
Yeah.
So you release adrenaline, and all that lovely oxygenated blood that is meant to go to your uterus will go to your extremities ready to fight or fly. Now, what's the modern day equivalent of that? What stimulates adrenaline? For the viewers, what do you think will stimulate adrenaline? Is it bright lights? Hearing other women give birth?
No.
BP machines? Strangers putting their fingers inside you?
We'll come back to that in a second. So can dads have that oxytocin when the baby's born?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I need to explain something to you. The first time that our first child was born, I'm just standing there terrified, don't know what's going on. And this little baby comes out, covered in gooey stuff, this little fuzzy ball. And I was overwhelmed. This wave of love washed over me. And I was like, quite taken aback. I was like, whoa, where the hell did this love come from? Second thought I had was, oh shit, this is how much my parents love me. Oh my God, I've been such a crap son. So I ring my parents and I'm like crying and sobbing. I'm like, I love you. And they're like, are you okay? What? I'm sorry for being such a terrible son. And I'm sorry about that time when I was 18, I gave you a heart. And they're like, what are you talking about? Is Cat okay? Is the baby okay? I'm like, yeah, the baby's okay. They're like, well, shut up and send us pictures. But I was really overwhelmed by this love, and it happened every single time. So that was the oxytocin release.
Yeah. A beautiful birth is healing for anyone who gets to witness it. And you got to witness the majesty of a new soul coming across to this plane. You'd have to have a heart of stone not to get affected by that. Every single birth I attend, I cry. Every single one.
Yeah.
And it's such a privilege. It's a rite of passage. It's such a spiritual experience, because welcoming a child into the world, I'm sure Russell Brand said this when he described his child's birth. He said, they're born, they open their eyes and boom, they're online. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So yes, this oxytocin.
I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it.
I do all the time. I think about birth. That's all I do. 24/7 is think about birth and how I can prove it.
So oxytocin is getting the blood to the uterus, and I think a lot of people don't realize that uterus. You know, the lay term is a womb, but actually it's a massive muscle. So it's a huge muscle, and muscles need energy. They need oxygen, and you know, if you imagine using any muscle, after a while you start fatiguing, you cramp up, you get tired. So it's quite an exhaustive process. You need to be quite fit and strong and be relaxed and have oxygen. And yes.
Yeah, you have to be healthy. And we do see problems in poorly nourished mothers. There's kind of a myth that I hear a lot, and it kind of gets me upset. Like, women are treated as if their body's kind of Russian roulette. Oh, you might get a placental abruption, you might get preeclampsia. That's not so. It's nutrition. So health is mind, body, and soul. And on a level of mind, body, and soul, there's only 3 reasons anyone can ever get ill. And it's toxicity, deprivation, and trauma. So on a level of body, what are you depriving your body of? What toxicity have you introduced into it? And what trauma do you have in your body? And if you understand that, you can start to unravel when there are issues. So I put women who have got any sort of ailment straight on the brewer's diet, because the brewer's diet is essentially a lot of protein. So
what is a brewer's diet?
So it's essentially eggs, lots of meat. Okay, let me backtrack a bit.
We still have to go through the normal physiological process of pregnancy as well.
Well, we're doing this now about the brewer's diet. So
let's do it.
When you grow your placenta, you need like a pool of blood behind it that sits behind the placenta. And in order to do that, and in order for your pool of blood behind the placenta to grow sufficiently, you need to expand your blood volume by up to 60% while you're pregnant.
Yeah. In
order to do that, your liver has to perform over 500 metabolic functions. And in order for it to do that, you need protein, about 120 grams a day. When we see things like placental abruption, gestational diabetes, it's bad nourishment. The gestational diabetes thing gets me, because it's just a poor diet.
Carbohydrates.
So many carbs, yeah. And you just go onto the brewer's diet. It can fix a multitude of things.
How do you spell brewers? Is it
Brewers? Simple
as that?
Yeah.
Is it almost like a keto paleo type diet? Or?
Almost. It's not quite keto. You don't go into ketosis with it.
Right.
But it's a hell of a lot of protein. Lots of eggs. And there's so many beautiful foods you can introduce into your body to help you with several ailments, but maybe we'll go into that later. But we need to concentrate on
but you know, it's really funny how many people think they've got a healthy diet. Because I ask all my patients, have you got a healthy diet? And, tell me about what you're eating. And I'd say 90% of people who are eating an unhealthy diet actually think they're healthy. And they'll start off with things like, oh yeah, in the morning I'll have Special K. I'm like, oh my God. Or, bran flakes or some cereal. And I'm like, how is that healthy? Or I have granola and low fat yogurt and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, this is not. And then they'll say something like, and I don't eat meat. And I'm like, God, here we go. and sorry, where is this diet healthy? But yeah, it's quite a big problem that I'm seeing, the misconception of what it actually means to eat healthy.
Well, I think you've just illustrated a perfect point about why the system's been over-medicalised. If people are thinking they're eating Special K and that's healthy in the morning, why do they think that's healthy? Because they've been told to think it's healthy by the mainstream media, by, I mean, even if you look on NHS website and stuff, they will say, eat these kind of foods. So it's understandable why people get to that conclusion.
Have you seen what they sell in the hospital canteen?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Anyway, carry on. We're digressing here a bit.
So it's totally understandable how women can get caught up in a fearful system, because if you're told that your body will fail you because of insert ailment here, like you've got this risk factor, you want the best for your baby, and you're going to do what you're told.
Yeah.
Because of fear. But here's the thing. In 15 years, I have never seen a woman's instinct wrong, ever. And I think we've been majorly separated from our instinct. We are living in our egoic construct. And the Buddhists call it the monkey mind. You get the thoughts all the time, and it's fearful thoughts after fearful thoughts. And unfortunately, the maternity system seems to be run on fear. We're worried that this will happen, we're worried that will happen. But at no point do they say, Mum, what do you feel? Because I've never seen someone's instinct wrong.
It's funny. I actually say to people all the time, never, ever ignore your gut instinct, which is the same thing, I think, we were talking about. I mean, I've never been let down by my gut instinct. The only time it's ever been wrong is when I've kidded myself that, oh no, this is the right thing. Actually, I should have gone with the gut instinct.
Yeah, well, that's your head. That's your. It's amazing what you can convince yourself of.
Okay, so back to pregnancy. So, you're 9 months in, you're starting to get contractions, and sometimes you get these fake contractions, Braxton Hicks. And then, what is a normal pregnancy process like? How many hours do you normally expect? What are the different stages that people go through? And, you hear about dilation. And can you just break it down for this little idiot orthopod here? For women out there and young men who are, they're hoping to have a family and kids, what should they expect a normal pregnancy to be like?
Are you asking me what should they expect from the system, or what should they expect from their body? From
their body. What's a normal physiological kind of process?
Okay. It's every woman has a very unique body. So I'm sure you've all heard of, time your contractions. Don't worry about that. Okay. Don't worry about timing your contractions. Just let it unfold. In birth, you have to be the epitome of a human being, not a human doing, not a human becoming. Just surrender and be. So don't micromanage, worry about what's going on. Just allow your body to connect. But here's kind of what to expect. So a primip, a first-time mum, you'd expect an established labour. And established means your cervix is dilated over 4 centimetres. I'll explain that in a minute. You'll expect about 8 to 12 hours established labour. That could be longer, that could be shorter. There is no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Your waters can break before you go into labour. That's totally normal. Your waters can break during or not at all. If babies are born in their bag of membranes, it's called a mermaid's purse.
Oh.
On call, you can see the baby looks amazing when it comes out. You've got this membrane sac around the head and waters can be popped afterwards. So there's no one size fits all approach to birth. Your contractions can be very, very intense, very sporadic. Like they'll say to you, if they're over 60 seconds, that means they're established labour. But no, because you can have very strong and long contractions in early labour. So they class it as, there are 3 steps to labour. And I say this, I don't actually believe this. I believe labour is very fluid, but this is what you will probably learn if you go through the system. So you've got the first stage of labour, and that's your cervix dilating. So the cervix is the neck of the womb. Baby's exit.
Yeah.
So your
the out
cervix
tunnel.
That's it. So your cervix will efface and dilate, and that's the first stage. And it's from closed to 10 centimeters dilated. Now, I question: does every cervix need to be 10 centimeters if the babies are all different sizes? Probably not. And then the second stage of labour is pushing. So the mother is pushing although that again, it's the fetal ejection reflex. Mothers don't really need to push. The body just does it for them. And the baby is born earthside. And the third stage of labor is the delivery of the placenta. So the placenta has been keeping your baby nourished all the 9 months you've been growing your baby, and that has to be delivered too. Now, I see labour as very fluid because there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, as I've already said. You can have very sporadic contractions.
Yeah.
I mean, there are signs that baby might not be in a good position, like a lot of back pain, stop-start labour. That's called OP, occiput posterior position. So the baby's back is facing your back. There are lots of variations of normal, and it's normal for a baby's head to be coming out first, a cephalic birth. It's also normal, it's a variation of normal, for a baby's bum to come out first, a breech birth.
Yeah.
You've got a frank breech, bum first, footling breech, feet first. But that's all very normal. So that's what you'd expect in a normal birth. You'd expect yourself to go through something called transition. So between 8 and 10 centimeters, you'll get this sudden rush of adrenaline. The only time you'll need adrenaline, in fact, when you're giving birth, because you're going to start pushing and your body starts to bear down, and it's an uncontrollable urge. And that's usually when women hit a brick wall. I can't do this anymore. Usually the most painful. But then okay, you're about to push in a minute. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
So the transition stage will get the women to start bearing down, and you'll see it. They'll stand up and try and hold something that's not there, because they have to have this rush of, they're just getting really, really guttural sounds of the cow, the mooing noises are coming down. And then it's time to birth the baby. But that's very normal. And it's very normal for women to want to stand up.
Pregnant women almost broke my hand squeezing it so hard. I kid you not. So what happened was her husband was stuck somewhere and I was the med student. And I said, it's late. It's 10 o'clock. I need to go now. She went, "You're not going anywhere." And she squeezed my hand. I think it was that moment. And I just stayed.
Transition, yeah.
Yeah, it was honestly, I was like, oh my God. And she almost broke my hand. I was squeezing so hard. But it was quite a nice one.
That's happened a lot.
That was a natural birth.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Well, that's normal because women go through that stage. They're like, I can't do this anymore. It's very normal, by the way, to give birth on all fours or standing up.
I was going to say, is there a best position?
Upright, yeah.
Standing?
Yeah.
Squatting, sitting?
Just an upright position. So whether you're on all fours, standing, squatting, upright.
Because when you see the movies, everyone's lying on their back.
You see that in hospitals.
With their legs up in stirrups and God knows what else.
That's called the lithotomy position.
Lithotomy. I should know that. And so that's not natural?
No.
Tell me why. Why is that not?
Because your pelvic outlet will decrease by 30% if you lay on your back. Just imagine your sacrum pushing against the bed.
Yeah.
How can it open?
Oh, yeah.
Would you go for a poo laying down?
No. God, no.
You don't use gravity to bring the baby down. The mum can't open up properly.
Yeah,
you can't push uphill.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look, I'd never say never, because I've seen women who have had a very, very, very fast labour and they have naturally felt to lay down, because I think it's their body's way of saying, you've got to slow this down, otherwise you're going to tear. So they have laid down, because then maybe it did slow the labour down a bit. But as a general rule, I'd say avoid that like the plague. So
I think so we've talked about the stages, and I agree, things are always a spectrum. You can't define it and put it into little boxes and so this is it, phase 1, phase 2. It kind of blends. There's a spectrum. Maybe you go into one phase and then slightly back again. I think people like to know when they're fearful and it's the unknown and they're scared. What I've found, especially with patients, is they ask lots of questions. They want answers. They want to micromanage and control. That's their way of getting back in charge of a state where they're in fear and they don't understand. And they want to be told, okay, this is going to last this long. This is maybe you need this many contractions, or this is when you need to come up to hospital. And maybe they latch on to that. And maybe they should be told, actually, don't worry, relax. Your body knows what it's doing. And more comforting words and soothing words. I don't know what your take is on this. But yeah, I mean, is there a point where women should be like, yep, these are the contractions. This is when you should expect the baby to come out? Because I think women just want to know like when to expect, or would you say just relax and just let it go? And
if you go into the neocortex of your brain, the the analyzing part of your brain, that's not conducive to giving birth. So just imagine, you know what it feels like when you're falling asleep? You need to be in that state. So you talk to a woman very calmly when they're giving birth, very quietly. You don't turn lights on. You don't stimulate the neocortex. You don't stimulate adrenaline. It's not helpful to micromanage your birth. It's about surrendering. I see women who can't quite let go and they can't get out of their head. I see a long labour and I see complications. It's the women who surrender and think, okay, I feel safe. But look, it's not fault at all, because if you're going through a medicalised system, you're taught that you have to tick this box and that box. And for you to be able to have permission to give birth in your own home, you have to be signed off by this risk factor and that risk factor.
I agree with what you're saying about you almost want to enter this meditative state, relaxed and let it go. What are those classes called? Prenatal classes, like before.
Oh, like Lamar's
NTC or
NCT.
NCT. So I told my wife, I bet that lady's gonna have problems in her pregnancy. And the reason why was she was very anxious, very highly strung, right? Would get, telling her husband, are you listening? Are you blah, blah, and, micromanaging everything, taking notes for everything, literally taking notes. Did you hear that? Did you remember this? And when we would chat, it was like everything was precise. She had organized this and that. And she was never relaxed. She didn't seem to be enjoying it. It was more like, I don't know, a project.
She sounds very fearful.
I think so. And when we met afterwards, you know how you have the morning coffees afterwards, and you go along, all the pregnant mums, and you're there as well. And she would be recounting her story, and it was just basically like a nightmare. And my wife felt quite guilty because I was like, oh, how was yours? I was like, oh, it was lovely. It was natural birth. I didn't need an epidural. It just had a little tiny bit of gas in the air, and it was wonderful. And it was like almost guilty for saying that, because then it was like, what was yours like? And she was like, oh, it was horrific. It was terrible. I was in agony. I was in pain. I had an epidural. I had a C-section. Oh my God, I'm never going through this again. And honestly, I knew this was going to happen. I could see it. But then some people might argue, well, it's easy for you to say you're not the guy with the baby and you're not pushing. It's going to be agony and painful. And I just feel like you need to be in a positive mindset, like everything in life. Just be very relaxed and let your body take over.
I totally agree. But sometimes if you're not particularly on that journey and you're still in a lot of people who are living in survival mode, so they might have had a lot of childhood trauma. They tend to want to micromanage everything because their well-being is determined by external sources rather than happiness being an inside job.
Yes.
So that micromanagement comes in as a form of a trauma response. So it's totally understandable. So if one of my ladies was supporting someone in that scenario, our job would be not to talk about every single medical scenario, but to listen to her, listen to what she's frightened about, because she has to get it out.
Yeah.
And then you need 3 ingredients for a good birth. You need to feel safe and loved and wise. And as a holistic birth practitioner, it's important to help the woman come to those feelings herself.
Safe
and loved
and wise. So you need to make them feel that there's nothing scary out there. Make them feel loved and you're listening to them. Wise, empowering them. Instinct, telling them, don't be fearful. This is what to expect. Your body knows what to do. Help it along. And, they talk about maternal mortality, like around pregnancy in the old days or in developing countries. It's quite a big thing. What is that? Do you have a figure? Do you know what it is? Like in the developing countries, like how big a problem is it? Women dying.
We still have a problem now. And in fact, in the US, they've got the highest maternal and infant mortality rate in first world.
Wow. Do you have a figure? Do you know what that is?
No, not offhand. I don't want to quote something
Okay,
I can't remember. So there are 3 reasons in my experience why birth goes wrong.
So tell me about before you do that, you talked about the natural birth, the oxytocin, the relaxing and the stages, and then the birth, and how you shouldn't count contractions and you shouldn't worry about, pushing it excessively, and there's not a time that you need to do that. And you're just saying it just naturally will happen.
If you were in a coma, your head needs no input into the process. You will just give birth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. 100%.
Okay. So now compare that with the medical system that we're in, this industrial medical complex, because I think that's what it is. It's not just maternity care. Across the board, medicine, big pharma has taken over and saying health comes in a vial, an injection, a procedure. How does it play out then in the hospital scenario? Tell me.
I'll give you a very typical scenario.
Yeah.
And it's become more and more popular. In the mainstream, I seldom see women go into spontaneous labour. So they've coined the term 40 weeks. You're pregnant for 40 weeks. And a German obstetrician named Nagel came up with that. And he based the calculations of 40 weeks on the lunar calendar. And we still use it today. It doesn't take into consideration your cycle, how long your menstrual cycle is. Or there's been some women, they've known when they've conceived because that's the only time they had sex. But yet the system's telling them, no, you're not due then. But that's how it works. So you're told, right, your baby will be due on this date.
Yeah, the due date. That's it.
The due date, yeah. Estimated due date. I call it a guess date. But if you go over this 40-week mark, the panicking occurs. And they will say, you're overdue. Now, I would say to any pregnant woman, expect to be pregnant for 42 weeks because it's normal.
Yeah.
But you don't ever see it because they don't allow you. So you go overdue and they say, right, well, if you go over 41 weeks, they say scary things like your chances of stillbirth double. Double of what? Is it 1 in 5 to 2 in 5 or 1 in 500 to 2 in 500? Because language matters.
Yeah, so what is it?
So it goes from 0.01% to 0.02%.
That's not very much.
No, it's not. And we don't even know why that happens. But there might be other variations in play of why the stillbirth might occur. But that's a topic for another day. They'll tell you.
So that's now we're talking about relative and absolute risks.
Absolute risk, yeah.
And the thing is, what's not important is relative, it's absolute. What is your absolute risk? And that doesn't sound like it's very high.
Your absolute risk is after 42 weeks is 0.02%.
Wow. Okay.
So, and then they'll tell you your placenta will fail you. So what essentially they're saying is an organ will stop working, but the rest will be fine. There's no research. Okay, before I go into a typical birth scenario, I must make this very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Maternity practice, midwifery and obstetrics, is only 8% category A evidence-based. So you'd expect midwifery care to be 100% evidence-based. If you're being told to have this C-section or being told to have this induction, it's only 8% category A. So they did a study, category A being really good, substantial evidence to E being crap.
What do you mean by evidence-based medicine?
So so let's say, for example, we need to tell you to be induced because the evidence shows us that going overdue will create problems. There might be a stillbirth. So is that evidence-based?
So I've got an issue with this whole term evidence-based medicine. It was originally coined by Professor Sackett, I believe in Canada. And he described it as 3 things of equal weighting. One was the obvious peer-reviewed literature, scientific research, but it was only 1/3. The other third was clinician experience.
Yes, it's their opinion.
And so the clinician's experience of, delivering hundreds of babies, what works and what doesn't, And the other third that often gets mistaken or forgotten is patient values and expectations. Empowering the patients, giving them autonomy, informing them, listening to them, showing them compassion.
Principle number 4 of the NHS Constitution, that is very seldom looked at.
Okay, we'll come to that. So the thing is, that's really what evidence-based medicine is. It's all of those patient value expectations that I've just touched upon, the clinician's experience that should not be ignored. You know, you've been doing your job for 10 years. You kind of know what you're doing. And on top of that, any evidence from research and whatnot. Now, what I've noticed is that over the years, that term evidence-based medicine has neglected 2 of those very important arms and focuses purely on scientific research. And what we know with scientific research is it can be wrong, it can be corrupted, and we're putting all our eggs in one basket and we're ignoring, other things like you, the clinician, and what the patient wants to say.
Well, that's a major issue in maternity care, because let's say, for example, they were performing a study to see the outcomes of a vaginal birth after cesarean section. My late mentor, Beverly Beach, said the most profound thing when talking to an obstetrician, because he said to her, "Madam, there's nothing you can't tell me that I don't know about birth." And she said, "You cannot understand the behaviors of birds by observing them in a zoo." And she was right, because if you're doing studies on women who are giving birth in hospital, that is not data of a physiological birth. That is data of a medicalised birth. So I'll go back to what I was about to explain. So you've been told you've got to be induced. So they bring you in for an induction and you don't question it because you think they have your best interests at heart.
And how do they do the induction?
So they will start off usually with something called Propess or Prostin. In America, if you're listening, I think they call it Servidol over there. And it's prostaglandin gel or a pessary. And the idea is they put the gel or the pessary inside the vagina to soften the cervix. They will test your cervix first with something called the Bishop score to make sure it's effaced and dilated enough for you to be favourable for an induction. If that doesn't work, they will do ARM, artificial rupture of membranes. So they will get this amni hook, looks a little bit like a big crochet needle, and they'll put it up your vagina and break your membranes so the waters break. If that doesn't work, they bring out the big guns, and this is syntocinon. It's a synthetic form of oxytocin. It does not work like natural oxytocin. It doesn't reach your brain. You don't get that beautiful euphoric birth high.
Right.
What it does do is it blasts your uterus over and over again with synthetic oxytocin, and it's so strong and your contractions become so close together that you're in significant pain. So you ask for an epidural.
Oh, you're basically cramping. Your uterus is cramping.
Constantly, over and over again. It's very, very painful for a lot of women.
So could it be that the uterus, by contracting so much, simply isn't getting oxygen? And if you get a lactic acid buildup, that's actually incredibly painful. That's what causes the muscle cramps and stuff like that. Is it very similar to that?
Absolutely. And more importantly, but that's not a problem in the mainstream maternity system because we have epidurals. And epidurals are, is a mixture of bupivacaine and fentanyl. So they put that in your spine, in the epidural gap in your spine, and you shouldn't be able to feel anything after that. Now, the problem with the epidural, it renders you on your back. You can't move around. You can't use gravity to get your
you can't
baby
walk.
down. No.
Aren't you paralyzed?
Yeah, well, you have a mobile epidural, but 9 times out of 10, because you're on the epidural, and you've been induced, so you are at higher risk now of having problems, they will put you on something called a CTG, and they're 2 straps they put around your tummy, and you're strapped to the bed.
Continuous
fetal monitoring.
That's it.
Cardiotachograph.
That's it.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So you're strapped to the bed. You can't move. If you move, the probes move, and they think there's D cells. So you have to stay still to have a trace. And you're on your back, and baby can't move down properly. Now you're not feeling the extra pain of the contractions because of the epidural, but the epidural slows the labour down. So then they up the synto, and then so it goes, and there's a domino effect. Now because of your uterus being blasted with these unnaturally strong contractions, it compromises oxygen flow to the placenta, and then the baby tends to go into distress, and we see decels, and then you're
What's
rushed
decels?
decelerations of the heart.
Okay.
So
You're using technical jargon.
Sorry. Baby's heart rate.
I'm a simple orthopod.
Your baby's heart rate drops, and your baby goes into distress, there's the baby's heart rate goes up.
And then the nurses and doctors rush in.
They all rush in, and you're sent in for either a cesarean section or an instrumental delivery, which means they will use something called forceps or a ventouse suction cup on the baby's head.
Yeah. But that can cause problems as well.
Huge problems.
What kind of problems?
Cerebral palsy.
Wow. That's because the developing brain was starved of oxygen.
It's also is fetal injury. So when you've got two huge forceps around your head, it can cause injury. Ebbs palsy as well.
Yeah.
They've got one side of the body that goes limp. It can cause, and not just for the baby, for the mum. So women who are in the lithotomy position with an epidural are far more likely to experience rectocils, so prolapsed bum, and then
nice.
Incontinence. And then we see in the mainstream media all these panty liner adverts like, oh, incontinence, it's normal. It's not. It's not normal. It's common. It's because of over-medicalised. You're not meant to have issues like that.
Right.
If you're put on your back with your legs in stirrups and you're working against nature and you're pushing uphill and your baby's trying to open your pelvic outlet, but it can't because your sacrum is hard on a bed.
Yeah.
And then you have to have forceps to force the baby out. Yeah, expect some problems.
Do you know our third baby was 2 weeks late? It was hilarious. I took paternity leave and I ended up sitting around doing nothing. Then the baby came. So it was apparently 2 weeks late, although now you're saying it's not late. It was just that's when
he was right on time, or she was right on time.
Yeah, that's when he wanted to come out. And basically it was quite, I won't lie, it was a difficult labor at home. It was harder than we were expecting, because
third baby.
We thought he was a 10-pound baby, and he ended up coming out with his arm in a Superman position.
Compound.
Yeah, and I think that's why. But it's really funny. We're at home. We're in our front living room, tiny little living room. We felt safe at home. Kids are asleep upstairs, not going anywhere. We had this amazing midwife, very experienced, very relaxed. At no point did I see her stress. She was speaking quietly, softly. The lights were very dim. We had candles. My wife was swooning. She was very pale. I mean, she's white English, but she was like translucent. She was fainting at times. I was getting quite nervous. And then we was like, come on, you have to do it now. And then the baby came out, and everything was fine. And the midwife was so relaxed the whole time. I have to admit, I cried because I was quite nervous. I was like, what's going on here? This is taking quite a long time. I was just so relieved. And then the baby boy came out, and we didn't know what sex it was. And I'd lost my dad that year. So, I had 2 girls. I've got 2 girls. I love my girls. I used to get quite angry when people would say to me, oh, you're having another baby because you want a boy. I was like, no, I'm happy getting another third girl. I love my girls. But when the little boy came out, I thought about my dad, losing him, and then getting the cycle of life, getting another boy into the family, and my wife was okay. It was amazing. But the midwife was incredible, and I think all 3 of our pregnancies and deliveries were quite magical. We didn't have this over-medicalization, thankfully.
Well, that's amazing. And for a midwife to be that calm and wonderful at a birth, you are very blessed.
She was very experienced. She was cool.
She sounds amazing.
She was cool as a cucumber.
Awesome. That's the idea. Not to flap, not to panic.
And it sounds a bit bizarre, Nickita, but I really feel energies of people. I can sense anger or love, or people are happy, people are nervous. I can just feel that around them without them even saying anything. And she was just exuding calm and confidence. She was quite an incredible lady. And I think, a midwife, any doctor, health clinician, midwife, whatever, when you're so good at your job and you make something so easy and so pleasant and so nice, you're just indebted to them. You're just so grateful.
That is the epitome of with women, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
being with, you're not there to do anything. You're not there to fix anything or save the day. You're there to be with woman and just show her love and be a quiet observer.
So do you think that the over-medicalisation is simply because of lack of experience amongst the midwives and the doctors and fear that, oh, you know what, something's going to go wrong, we're going to get sued, so this is just the easiest option, like, C-section, baby out, job done?
Yep, that's definitely part to do with it. You're only as good as a midwife that trained you. And breech birth. It's as common as rocking horse poo now in the NHS. You just don't see vaginal breech births because the midwives aren't trained in it. Well, they have to do training in it, but after, when they've qualified, they don't see any vaginal breech births to practice. So how can they have a skill at something that if they don't learn how to do it? And if you have a pregnancy where you're diagnosed with a breech baby, you'll go from midwifery care straight to obstetric-led care. If you are very, very lucky, they might say you can attempt a vaginal delivery at hospital, but they'll lay you down. It will be hands-on. There's a saying in the birth world, hands off that breech. You do not touch a breech baby. Unless there's an absolute emergency, you leave the woman alone. She doesn't need to be touched. The baby doesn't need to be touched. But
aren't risk factors much higher if it's a breech baby?
So,
or again, is this relative absolute risk business?
Yeah.
Tell me.
A breech baby has the same risk of infant mortality with a cesarean section as it does a vaginal birth, and we're not quite sure why. So they have the same risk of dying no matter which way the baby is delivered. There was something called the Hannah trial about breech birth, and they decided that breech birth was dangerous. Then that study was retracted because they discovered that the problems were occurring with hands-on obstetricians who were over-medicalising it, and they found it was perfectly safe with an experienced birth attendant who understood physiological upright breech birth. But with midwives now, I mean, when I talk to student midwives, when I say, how many of you have seen a physiological birth? Hardly any of them put their hands up because they see inductions, they see CTG monitoring, and they see just high risk pregnancy. So how can you be skilled at something if you never see it? You have to be lucky.
Through de-skilling.
Yeah, it's a machine. It's a machine. It's a conveyor belt system. And what makes me so sad is women think their bodies have failed them. They haven't. The system's failed them. They come out traumatized. Birth trauma is so significant. And it shouldn't be sniffed at, and women need to be listened to and heard.
So are we talking about birth trauma as in like just giving birth is traumatic to some women, or are we talking about the way the system and what they go through childbirth and the impact that external forces are placed? Is that traumatic? I mean, so describe, what do you mean?
All of it. The system is not designed to be with women. It's designed to be with system. And unfortunately, the byproduct of that is your birth can be sabotaged if you're not wily enough to ask questions. So let's say, for example, you've been told you've got to be induced because your baby's enormous. And they're obsessed with doing more scans now, like several during pregnancy. We don't have any long-term data of scan safety. What are we doing? So they're told you've got a huge baby. Well, the questions I would be suggesting that you ask your care provider if you're being told this.
But are ultrasound scans not safe?
I wouldn't say so, no. Absolutely not.
Why is that?
They're very loud for babies. You put a probe on a woman's abdomen and then they move away. It's loud. I don't think they're safe, not in my experience, no.
That's a really interesting point. And it's funny, we think things are safe. But when you think, people say sing and when you're pregnant and the baby can hear it, they can hear the voice. And they must have a hearing frequency, and we're putting these probes on with thousands of hertz and voo, voo, voo. And yeah, clearly that is going to be affected. Yeah, I'd never thought of that.
There's
actually.
one author, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. He linked excessive use of scans to microcephaly, so being born with a small head. And but listen, I don't know. I can't. Here's the thing. Just as
I'm open to everything.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm open to everything.
Absolutely.
I think, why not? You're right. Absolutely. This, it's not normal for ultrasound waves to pass through a pregnant woman's uterus. That's not a normal evolutionary natural thing. So you're right. And
it heats up the cells. So we don't know what it does to a 7-week fetus. If it's heating up the cellular structure of the baby, what's that doing? Is that manipulating the cells? We don't know.
Yeah.
I can't say 100% it's unsafe, but
you're right.
The system can't tell us it is safe. That's basically what I'm saying. So if you're told you've got a big baby, I would urge you to ask these questions. Can you please define big? And we're not goldfish in a bath. The babies aren't going to outgrow us. I've attended 11.5-pounders at home with no problems and no tearing. So for a midwife or a doctor to tell you that your baby's too big for you to birth, they're either lying or totally misguided. And they don't understand physiological birth. I would then ask, can you please tell me what your margin of error is on your scans? Spoiler, 15%.
Right.
At least.
Yes.
So
it's an indirect measurement, isn't it?
Yeah. We've all heard of someone saying, oh, my baby's £10 going to be induced and it's born £7.4. Yeah.
Right.
So, okay, ask them that. Also ask them, what percentage of the babies born to induction end up in the neonatal intensive care unit? You need to ask these questions. That's, just being told you have to be induced, that's not informed consent. What percentage of your babies end up in the neonatal intensive care unit after induction? Ask them.
What percentage?
Well, it varies from hospital to hospital. But that's what I'm saying. You have to ask the questions. You need to use the Socratic method, because if they're telling you, you have to do this, your body's going to fail you.
What's the Socratic method?
So Socrates...
Remember, I'm really simple. you keep forgetting. Don't be fooled. I'm not a smart guy. Just keep it simple. So what is the Socratic method?
It's based on Socrates, who was a philosopher.
Greek philosopher, yeah.
Greek philosopher.
I know that.
And Socrates said the best way to teach someone is to ask them questions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we use the Socratic method at when push comes to shove. If someone's been bullied or coerced into insert medical intervention here, we know the right questions to ask. So it's not up to you to prove your body won't fail you. It's up to them to prove it will. So if you're being told you have to be induced, ask these questions. Ask them, what are the adverse effects of an induction? Why is my baby safer outside the womb? Do you care to comment on the McDormand et al. Study, I think it was? That babies born in the preterm period, so like 38 weeks. So you got term 40 weeks, preterm 38 to 40 weeks. Babies born at 38 weeks were more likely to die in the first year of life.
Oh, wow.
So do you want to comment on that study? You have to ask the right questions. And my method so far with this letter writing has been 100% effective. And when I say effective, it's got them to focus their brains and answer these questions rather than telling women, you're doing this, you're doing that. They've actually become doing like a woman-centered approach, which is wonderful, because then they actually have a say in what happens to their body. Yay.
And that's what we want. We want women to have a say. Part of it is empowering them and educating them. But the problem is the system, if, your mom gave birth to you with a C-section, she can't pass on that knowledge.
Microbiome. I thought you were going to say about microbiome.
Oh, we'll come to that in a second. But I'm just saying, like, if your mom gave birth to you through a C-section, she can't tell you what to expect or what it will be like. She might have horrific memories and ideas, and you just end up going through the system and having a C-section, and then your child, and it goes on like that. You've forgotten that the history, the knowledge of what it was like to give childbirth naturally is lost. You're going to say something about biome. What were you going to say?
That's another issue with human health at the moment. If anyone wants to watch it, I highly recommend watching a documentary called Microbirth. You can find it on Amazon, I believe. By Tony Harmon. She's an amazing woman in the birth world. But anyway, in a nutshell, it matters how your babies come into the world, because for those of you who aren't familiar with gut health is amazing, and gut health is everything. So the lining of your intestines is only 1 cell thick, and it's very, very easy to penetrate, and we can get what's called leaky gut, and it can cause a multitude of problems from like Alzheimer's. I mean, that your gut health can even affect how your
mental health, depression,
mental health,
anxiety,
depression.
everything, immune system, everything.
Yep, autoimmune conditions.
Yeah. Inflammatory conditions, everything.
Absolutely. So there was a study done to understand why we're so ill as a nation.
Oh God, there's so many reasons.
Right, and looking at gut health. And there was a correlation with C-section rate, because if a baby is born via C-section, they're not squeezed through the vaginal canal, and they're not seeded through the mouth with the microbiome, the human microbiome. And the second stage is skin-to-skin contact, and the third is breastfeeding. This is very unlikely to happen with a C-section. So your baby is not given that microbiome, that kickstart to your child's immune system doesn't occur. Obviously, you can do things. If you have to have a C-section, there are things you can do to help with the microbiome seeding. You can roll up a gauze and put it in your vagina. When the baby's born, just put it around the baby's mouth.
Oh, wow.
And then breastfeed, obviously, and skin-to-skin contact, even though you've had a C-section. But this doesn't happen in a normal medical C-section. It's baby's whipped out, cut. The cord is cut straight away, which is horrific. Because if you cut a cord straight away, that's a third of the baby's blood supply gone. And they just cut the cord without waiting for it to go white. So the baby's deprived of the human microbiome. If you've had a little girl, even if the baby grows up to have to become pregnant, even if she has a vaginal birth, it's said that she can't pass on the microbiome because she's never had it in the first place. And that's how they're correlating our poor immune system now because of the rate of growing of C-sections.
That makes complete sense because, one thing I always struggled with as a medical student was when they used to say that the gastrointestinal tract, GI tract, was actually the outside, inside your body. And I never got that. But eventually I understood what they were saying because basically from the skin, the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the intestine, it's a tube connected to the outside the whole time. So it is the outside world, but traveling inside your body. So the skin, all the bacteria, everything is, even though it's inside your tummy and your body, it's still separate from your true body. There's a barrier. And then it comes out the bottom end. Yep. So you've got the outside world traveling inside you. Yeah. And you're right. When you're born through a vaginal birth, you're squeezed out, you're coated, your head, your face, your mouth, and all those bacteria are getting inside you again. That's how it works.
And don't wash your baby. Newborns don't need to be washed. You don't need to start clearing all that gunk off of them. Leave it.
Oh, there's a name for it. What was it?
Vernix.
Okay, wow. Yeah. So let's move on a little bit. I've got a few more questions. So what's your idea on things like water births and the best position, for a lady to get into? What are your thoughts on that?
Water birth is amazing. It's a beautiful transition from water to water. So babies are in this amniotic fluid. It's a very gentle transition. It's a beautiful way to give birth. You're less likely to have perineal tears because it's a more gentle way of coming out. You're upright. Baby can just float. They don't breathe until their lungs are exposed to air. So they can float under there quite happily.
Oh, wow.
They're not taking a breath. Their oxygen comes from the placenta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So as soon as their lungs, that's why you never touch a breech baby. Because if you've got the torso hanging out and someone grabs it, they could try and take a breath.
Right.
But they need to be pulsating with the cord. And there's things that you can do to check that the breech birth is going normally. So when the baby's torso is out, you need to look for cleavage. If the baby's got cleavage, it shows that their shoulders are tucked in and you haven't got one up there. And it's not going to get trapped. You can look at the colour of their cord. They do this thing called tummy crunches. They bring their little legs up and you can see, that's good. Things are happening beautifully.
We had a water bath at the midwife unit for our first pregnancy and childbirth, and my wife loved it. But then she said, "Okay, enough of this," and got out. And she squatted. I remember her squatting, and then the baby came out. And then we got the water bath for the second baby at home, and that was quite a palaver setting it up, and then filling it up and everything. And she wasn't in it for very long. She said, right, I need to get out. And then she went on fours and then squatted again and came out.
So she did what she felt to do.
Yeah, I was quite surprised. She kept moving around. I was like, wow. But she just seemed to move around. I have to admit, my wife, she's incredible. She's very Amazonian, very tough. She was very calm. And yeah, she was very confident she wanted a home birth. And I just remember everyone at work saying to me, wow, you guys are crazy. Like the anaesthetist would be like, oh, that's a big mistake. Oh my goodness. Can't believe you're doing that. When something goes wrong, what are you going to do?
Yeah, but all they see is birth going wrong because they see that day in, day out.
It was totally all fear, doom and gloom. I couldn't believe the number of people who would say to me, oh my God, I heard you're going to be doing a home birth. Are you feeling all right? What's wrong with you? And I was kind of like, wow, like surely this is like a natural thing. But is it like what percentage of births now are home births and how many are out in the hospitals?
Well, if you birth with when push comes to shove, our home birth rate is 68% and the national average is 1%.
Whoa. Hold on one sec. You're telling me 1% of babies born in this country are actually at home?
Yep.
That's insane.
I know. Makes me want to cry. Like,
that's terrible. 1%?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
it's gone up a bit since the pandemic.
Why does it make you want to cry? Because I'm just shocked.
Because women are denied a rite of passage. They're denied. They're being taught that their bodies are going to fail them. But if you speak to anyone who's had an empowered home birth, well, no, forget home birth. Look, I don't even think anyone should give birth at home. I think they should give birth where they feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel safe at home, don't give birth there. Because where there's fear, there is problems.
That's a really good point. Because, the first birth that we had was in a midwife-led unit. And even then we were criticized like, oh my goodness, there's no doctors there. Are you guys crazy? And I think it was because it was such an amazing experience for my wife and she was very happy and the midwives were again amazing. Mm. She was like, I could do this at home. Mm. So it was that amazing experience in the midwife unit that led her to go, I can do this. I can do this at home. And then she had two at home. And you're right. It's wherever you feel comfortable and where you wanted to have the baby born.
It wouldn't be a good idea for someone who was fearful to give birth at home. If they felt safer in the hospital, that's where they should give birth. Because in my experience, if I see fear, I see problems.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying give birth at home. It just makes me so sad that there's this beautiful experience that so many women are never getting the chance to experience because they haven't had the chance to lift their head above water and look around at what the alternatives are. Because if you have a quick glance on Google, you'll come up with what the system guidelines are. You don't know that there are questions to ask. But here's the crazy thing. Women do a lot of research into the next car they're going to buy or their wedding or their hair. But when it comes to childbirth, because it's like the Milgram effect, isn't it? Like
describe that. I know what that is, but what is that experiment?
Someone of authority telling you what to do, and you'll just do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even if it means hurting
someone else.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
It's sad, isn't it? Most people, 80% of people will do that. Just because someone with authority is telling you to do something, they'll be like, okay.
Yep. And that's not the Milgram experiment. Is more akin to the staff that are passively supporting the system.
Yes. Not questioning it.
Yeah.
Fearful, obedient, just doing as they're told. And we're seeing it even now today. I mean, I'm not going to go into certain topics, but I think people know what I'm talking about, where people are blindly following authority. And my biggest bugbear is people are abdicating their personal responsibility, their health, their wellness to people who, frankly, don't give a damn about their health and wellness. And it's lazy. And I think it's our education system. I think it's our culture. We're just told, don't question authority. Don't question. Just don't take responsibility. Be lazy. Just take the easy shortcuts. And we need to stop that as a society, as a civilization. If you're going to move forward, we can't have that. Individuals need to be empowered and so that they make the right choices for themselves and their loved ones. But it's hard. I mean, it's ingrained in the culture now. Some people aren't ever going to do that. They're going to carry on eating junk food, not exercising, not sleeping properly, consuming garbage, whatever form that may take, and then relying on someone else to fix them or fix their problems. and whether it be the government or, you know, clinician or whatever. And that's not good. That we can't have a society. That's not a fit society.
No, it's not. And it is about taking responsibility for your birth. If you want to have an empowered birth, no matter what outcome it is, if I see women who have made informed decisions the whole way along through their pregnancy, even if they end up with emergency cesarean operation, they still feel empowered because they have made the decisions and they've taken responsibility for their birth. It's the women who feel out of control, who don't understand what is happening to them, that birth is happening to them rather than they're just giving birth.
I don't know about you, but I feel that you get empowered by knowledge. You need to understand, and understanding and informing and educating is part of that. That's how you become empowered. Taking responsibility and making the decisions yourself, and not relying on others, not being told what to do, or shared decision making. Someone is guiding and advising or just informing you, and you then digest and absorb that. Some people want guidance. Some people feel more comfortable like that.
They do. Now, the issue with that in the maternity system is if you empower your own birth experience and you go against guidelines, you get the social services called. It's just awful. And that's where we come in as well.
We'll come to your advocacy thing, because I don't really understand that. But I also have a bugbear when it comes to guidelines. The problem that I have with guidelines is they're not guidelines anymore. Guidelines to me suggest they're a guide. You know, you can take it, you can leave it, you can use it, you can, you know, use it to help you in your decision making. Increasingly to me, it's very centralized, and it's not a guideline. It's like, these are the rules. You are going to do this. So they're not guides anymore. They're instructions. They're orders. They're order lines, not guidelines. They're order lines. There you go.
Yep.
So these are the orders. Do this. And if you step out of line of the orders and you don't obey the order, then you get punished. And the problem with guidelines is, rather than relying on that clinician experience, remember I was talking about evidence-based medicine and the patient, you're taking the patient and the individual and the clinician, whoever they may be, out of the equation. And then you're relying on just a few scientific papers that could be corrupted, a few individuals, a panel, a group who are making the guidelines. And it's a hierarchical, centralized, top-down instruction order, do this. And you can't challenge it. It's not democratic.
No.
It's not individualized personal healthcare. It's not. It's one rule fits all. How's that good? How's that proper medical care? And I'm astonished that a lot of people don't see this for what it is. It's kind of scary, actually.
It also redirects your attention away from your true nature and your gut instinct. Because if you're looking over here at we've got to look at this evidence, but your gut's telling you something else.
Yeah.
Like, let's take meconium, for example. So meconium is when a baby's had a poo. It's their first poo. If meconium is witnessed in hospital, unfortunately, it becomes a bit of a hoo-ha and it's an emergency. But the truth is, the presence of meconium does not mean that baby is in distress, but the absence of meconium doesn't mean the baby's fine either. It takes experience and intuition to see what's going on here.
Is this meconium like coming at the vaginal tract?
Yeah, so or meconium in the liquor, so when your waters are broken and you can see meconium stained liquor.
What color would it be?
Greeny, yellowy, brown.
Okay.
It varies. You've got significant meconium, which is very tarry, like almost dark green, and then insignificant, which is yellow, but it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
And also it depends on where in labour. So if I saw meconium right at the end of a labour and the mum was overdue, it certainly wouldn't concern me, because the baby's digestive tract is mature and probably ready for a poo. But if I saw meconium quite early on in labour, I might think, the baby might have a little problem. But I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. But they can't tell you they do know. Like, we can't say there's evidence to suggest that what they're worried about is meconium aspiration syndrome, which is where the baby inhales the meconium and it can obviously cause a huge problem.
Yeah.
But this is where common sense is not so common anymore. I attended a birth last week and there was meconium right at the end of labour. It was a BBA, born before arrival, so the midwives didn't even get there. And then she went into hospital afterwards just to be checked. And there was absolutely no signs. So when a baby's got meconium aspiration syndrome, their nostrils flare, they can become a funny colour or they're grunting a lot. None of those symptoms took place. But because they're so worried about being sued, they wanted her to stay in for 12 hours to monitor a healthy baby. Because on the off chance that if she took him home and something would have happened, that they're going to get sued. But then what does she want to do? Does she want to take the baby home? And I've had women call me up saying, I want to take my baby home. I think my baby's fine. It may not have been to do with meconium. It may be something completely different. They're saying, if you go home, we're calling social services.
Wow.
All the time, Ahmed, all the time.
That's pretty high escalation.
All the time. I can't stress it enough. We get call after call after call.
Because I remember after our first baby, remember the birthing unit, I was amazed how quickly my wife just wanted to go home. She was like, that's great, let's go now. I was like, whoa, just relax, rest. And she was like, no, I want to go home and have a cup of tea. and I was amazed. Like literally, I think the next day or the day after, she was driving and just getting on with life. And I'm not going to mention people, but I know people quite close to me who had C-sections and they were in hospital and they could barely walk and they were laid up. I mean, because they've had a big operation. They've opened up their abdomen. They've got stitches. And I think the recovery was, for me, incredible after a natural birth. It was, and my wife just wanted to get the hell out of the hospital. It was just like, right, done, let's go home. And that's kind of normal, I think.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for the postnatal recovery period. And I think women do need to let their bodies recover, but you certainly don't need to be like, you're not an invalid.
That's it. You don't need, that's what I was trying to say. You don't need to be treated like an invalid. But I think if you have had a C-section, it sets you back, doesn't it?
It's major abdominal surgery. Of course it does. You can't drive for 6 weeks. You've got more risk of infection from the stitches.
And what are the other complications with a C-section? I mean, do you get hernias or
hernias? Yeah.
Does it make further pregnancies more likely to have C-sections? Does it make?
Yeah, but that's only on opinion. So that many women who ask for a VBAC, a vaginal birth after cesarean section, they're saying, nope, you've got to have another C-section because of you had one before. And they do this thing, trial of scar. They just test, they want to analyze how risky the scar is to rupture. I don't know why they say rupture. It's not a rupture. It's almost like an implosion, I suppose. But rupture of the scar, they worry about. Now, the likelihood of your scar rupturing in a second birth, you are more likely to meet and marry a millionaire tomorrow than for your scar to rupture. And you're certainly more likely to have a ruptured uterus with an induction. Because
of that high contraction,
they should
artificial.
Never be inducing anyone who's had a previous C-section, ever.
Okay, so that's a good point to make.
But they do.
So you mentioned advocacy. So why are you having to be advocates? What's the kind of typical scenario? Can you just explain that to me?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, free birth was on the rise, and free birth is when women choose to have an unassisted birth. They don't want midwives there, they don't want doctors there. They feel very confident to birth themselves, so they do.
So during the pandemic?
Yeah.
At home, in the hospital, everywhere?
They decided they wanted a birth at home without any medical attendance.
Why did that go up?
Because in the pandemic, women we already got fear-mongering, but there was even more fear-mongering. That your husband can't be present in hospital.
All right.
You have to wear a mask.
Yes.
Giving birth. You have to have this test and that test.
Got it. And they were like, sod that.
Sod that. No.
Right.
I'm doing this at home.
Right.
So free birth kind of went on.
Sorry,
the rise.
I told you I'm very simple. You need to explain everything.
Sorry. I shouldn't assume. So women thought, no, I'm going to take control of this and do it myself. Now, I'm totally supportive of free birth. If women feel confident to give birth without any medical assistance, good on you, do it. But what I would just put out there to make you question, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you're 100% confident in your body, or are you doing it because you don't like the alternative? Because the latter is not an option, it's coercion.
Right.
If you're scared of going to hospital, that means there will be fear. That means you wanted to go to hospital, but you don't like your options there.
Good point. Yeah.
So you have to think, and where there is fear, there are problems.
Yes.
So you've got to be very confident in your decision and take control and take responsibility for your birth.
So I'm a good, big believer in, if you think negative thoughts, negative things will happen. If you think positive thoughts, guess what? Positive things will happen. So for example, when it comes to surgery and I'm counseling my patients, I can tell they're nervous ones and I tend not to operate on them then. I say, look, if you think it's going to be painful after the surgery, it's going to be painful. If you think you're going to have a complication, you're going to have a complication. But if you are calm and cool and you're relaxed, guess what? You're not going to wake up in pain. You're not going to have a problem. So I'll give an example. I had a patient who's quite anxious. I've sat on them for almost 2 years, but they've begged me for the surgery and I said, let's do it. And during the operation, we do a local anesthetic block. So we put them to sleep and I do a great block. I mean, my blocks are amazing. 99% of the patients will wake up with no pain. And even though they're asleep, we can monitor for signs of distress or pain. So if I'm with my scalpel cutting something or drilling something, if the block isn't effective, the heart rate goes up, the respiration rate goes up, and then anaesthetist will turn around to me and go, are you doing something? She's not responding well, or this patient's reacting, he doesn't like it. Can you put some more local anesthetic in? Kind of incredible, because they're asleep, but they can feel the pain. So this patient had no response. The anaesthetist tells me, your block is amazing, Ahmad. I'm like, great. The patient is waking up in the anesthetic room. Are you comfortable? And they're nodding, yes. Are you in any pain? No. But they were very anxious. They've had 9 operations before elsewhere in their body, which was very painful. So they're traumatized. They're used to pain. They're expecting it. The patient's fully awake now. And we turn around and say, right, are you comfortable? I'm in agony. I'm like, what? Didn't respond during the operation. Didn't respond when they're waking up, drowsy. Now they're fully awake. I'm in a lot of pain. But that was because they were expecting to be in pain. They were fearful. Their brain has been traumatized, centralized to pain, past experiences. And I had to then sit down and relax and talk them through, no, actually, the block was great. It still is great. The fact you can move your toes doesn't mean the block isn't working. It's sensory block, not a motor block. And by later on in the day, I was like, are you comfortable now? Oh yeah, totally. Everything's fine. The pain's, it's okay. And it just goes to show you, if you think negative thoughts, if you're hardwiring yourself to that state, you're going to have problems.
The trauma response.
The trauma response.
Yeah. It's not necessarily your thoughts. So your thoughts create feelings and your feelings create your circumstances. Your feelings, your external world that you live in, every form that you see is a byproduct of how you feel. It's, if you've got this dialogue in your head that, we live in a world of scarcity and fear and we're meant to suffer, you will manifest that in some form.
But the game is rigged. I mean, we're told there's not enough resources in the planet. We're told there's too many of us. We're killing the planet.
No.
We're killing the environment. We're to blame. We're a parasite on this planet. The news is just bombarding us with fear. I mean, I just see anxiety and depression.
And fear breeds more fear. So
yes.
And just think of a consciousness as a bath, right? A bath of water. Some call this consciousness God, some call it the universe, but it's in us all. Now, the consciousness is our collective thoughts, right? So imagine putting some blue food coloring in that water, and the food represents fear. What happens? You drop it in, it spreads out, and it spreads out, but you can choose red instead, or the red pill. And you can choose to see love, and you can choose at any given moment to see love.
Yeah.
And not love as an emotion, love as a state of being. And if you are fearful, you've got a dialogue, you've got a story in your head, and it's usually from trauma.
Yeah.
From flawed premises we've been taught growing up, that you're responsible for other people's feelings, you're responsible for, there's so many flawed premises, but we have this story in our head. We've got these scripts, these narratives that the world is scarce and, money doesn't grow on trees and the money's the root of all evil. It's all nonsense. It's a story. But when you change the scripts and you start changing the conversation in your head, the feelings change. And the feelings are basically the language of the universe. When you're feeling a certain way, just expect to see more things and encounter more things to make you feel that way. It's not like no one's sitting up at night planning, oh, I want to feel like utter shit tomorrow. It's not that, but it's their feelings, their underlying feelings is basically your point of attraction. And we've been taught this so many times for over the thousands of years from several spiritual leaders. But maybe we won't go down that road today. Talking about birth. But birth is a spiritual experience.
I 100% agree. But what else are you advocating for? Like, what other issues do people run into?
Social services mainly. So the free birth is 100% legal. There is no law that says you have to have a birth attendant and a medical birth attendant. They worry about something called concealment of a pregnancy. Now, to be fair, from their point of view, there is something called baby farming that goes on.
Sorry, whoa, what?
Baby farming, it's a thing.
What?
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Well, babies are bred to sell and farm out. It's a thing. It's just like human trafficking. Women are told to, it's usually women from Eastern Europe, they're brought over here and they're taken into hospital with their uncle. And you have to call social services there. There's definitely a red flag. But with a wild pregnancy, so that's when you don't have any medical antenatal care whatsoever, which is 100% legal. But they see this as concealment of a pregnancy. There are awful things that happen, but they're tarring everyone with the same brush. And they have to meet these safeguarding thresholds. So in order to report someone to social services or start a Section 47, which means they want to take their children into care, they have to meet thresholds. They have safeguarding thresholds. But for some reason, they're being totally overlooked and saying, well, this woman didn't call us when she was in labour. That's a safeguarding issue. We're going to call social services. But Birthrights 2017 says no midwife is to be reporting anyone's social service for free birthing alone. There has to be other things. They'll bloody find them if they're looking for it. And it could be that your other child is homeschooled, and that's a safeguarding flag.
What?
Yeah.
This is insane. But listen, I need to ask you a little bit more about this baby farming thing. What the hell is baby farm? How big a problem is this?
I don't know too much about it. I just know it's a thing. It's nothing to do with my expertise. I just know it is a thing.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to go into too much detail because I don't know enough.
Okay,
so,
fine,
yeah.
fine. Let's stay away from that. Yeah. Oh my God, I need to look into that.
Yeah.
So what about the fact that, tell me about how you got into doing this in 10 different countries. I think that's incredible. So
yeah, I didn't intend for this to evolve how it did. I initially began when push comes to shove in 2020 because independent midwives in the UK lost their insurance to practice.
Are you trained as a midwife?
I started in midwifery, but I left pretty quickly because I felt it didn't align with me.
But you're qualified as a midwife, and now
I didn't finish.
Oh, you didn't finish?
No. So I'm a certified doula.
Sorry.
A doula is
how do you spell doula?
DOULA. DOULA. It's Greek. It means woman's servant.
Right.
But I was a doula, but it wasn't for me either. I'm not a midwife. I'm not a doula. I'm a traditional birth attendant. So I've basically gone down my own path. I have learnt from very, very wise.
You mentioned a mentor. Do you want to tell me
Beverly
about
Beach? Yeah, Beverly.
Because I think it's beautiful to acknowledge people who got you to where you are. And I've got so many amazing people. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be where I am. Can you tell me about her?
Yeah. So she died in February.
This year?
Yeah.
It's okay. Sorry, I need to get tissues. I've got this. A lot of people cry now when I have these conversations. It's okay. Crying is, I think, healing. You need to let it out.
I miss her. Beverly.
I'm getting goosebumps.
So
she sounds like an amazing person.
She's incredible.
Tell me why she was amazing.
She got into the public eye and she filmed a woman shackled in prison giving birth, and they wouldn't take her shackles off. And so Beverly exposed it.
Right.
And Beverly was chair of a company called AIMS for 40 years, and AIMS stands for Association for Improvement in Maternity Services. and she changed thousands of women's lives. She knew their rights. She knew the right questions to ask. She helped midwives. She helped women. She did so tirelessly for her whole life. And when I started When Push Comes to Shove, I didn't really know where it was going. And she helped me and she believed in me. And I'd always been called a hippie and various other horrible things. Although hippie's not a diss. I'm happy to be a hippie.
I'm a hippie now, despite the lack of hair. Seriously.
You know, but I wasn't taken seriously. I even went to med school very, very briefly because I thought people would take me seriously if I had letters behind my name. That was a very misguided attempt.
That means nothing now.
No, it doesn't. I know that. And then I found my people, and Beverly was so supportive. She taught me everything I know about navigating the system, understanding women's rights, and not being afraid to stand up to people, not being afraid to say, no, this isn't right. Just because you've got authority doesn't mean to say...
Those two letters, no. So important.
Yeah. No.
Anyway,
No.
carry on.
No. She was amazing. I remember the first conversation I ever had with her. I was a very green birth practitioner, and I had a client who was told because she was short, she couldn't give birth. And I was like, I don't even believe that. So I rang Beverly and she said, Nickita, what do Shetland ponies give birth to? I said, Shetland ponies. And she went, there you are. She was so funny. No nonsense. Just very straight down the line. She was fantastic. And she supported me the whole way. She helped me build When Push Comes to Shove. She was our advocate. And I'm honoured to have looked after her while she was passing away. She got her home death.
Oh.
She fought for home birth her whole life, and she got her home death. Surrounded by midwives that she'd helped.
Oh.
And before she passed away, one of the midwives opened the window to let her soul out just a few minutes before she went.
Do you know, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
My dad died at home, and it was not a pleasant experience. And I don't feel anyone prepared us for what to expect. I think we shy away from death. You know, we don't talk about it. You know, in med school, you know, I laugh. You know, as a doctor, I wasn't taught anything about nutrition. Wasn't taught anything about sleep. Wasn't taught anything about how to deal with stress. I wasn't actually taught anything about death. What death looks like, how it happens, how to cope.
Nor about birth, by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Yeah. These major life and death moments, you know, didn't know anything about it. And for me, sadly, my dad's death was quite a traumatic experience. And I don't think it has to be like that. It could have easily been a different way, but if we had been empowered, informed, and yeah, so I'm glad that she passed away at home, surrounded by love. I think that's very important, to be surrounded by love. I think one of the things that really made things, you know, very difficult for me in the last few years was seeing people die alone without their loved ones. I think that's one of the most cruel things that we as a society and as government have done. It's very sad, frankly.
Well, if they can convince us to accept that,
yeah,
what's going on?
So, anything else you want to say about Beverly Beach?
There's not enough words that can do that woman justice. She was a force. She was incredible. And in her honour, so when push comes to shove, we have an access fund. So that means anyone on a low income who can't afford private care, we will pay for it, for you to have it.
Wow.
And we have now called that access fund the Beverly Beach Project in her memory, because she was so passionate about continuity of care, because continuity of care during pregnancy is everything. If you bond with the woman attending your birth, you've got trust and therefore you feel safe. If you've got a stranger saying, I'm just going to examine you now. Also, ladies, you can say no to a vaginal exam. Your cervix isn't a crystal ball, but we might get into that another day. Like you don't have to have one. Just
when they always say, let us measure and put the fingers up.
No, there's no need for it.
Because I'll be honest with you, full disclaimer, I've had a PR examination a couple of times. I had emergency spinal surgery. I had cod equine. I was, incontinent, bowel, urinary, everything after an accident. And they would test and it was not pleasant. It's not nice having people stick fingers inside you.
No, it's not. And with your cervix can close back up if you're frightened.
So I can imagine having fingers around the front is just as uncomfortable as fingers around the back.
It's horrible, and it introduces risk of infection.
Even with gloves?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. And because they're touching things that they don't need to be touching. I'm not saying there's never a place for a vaginal exam. Of course there is, but it's very rare you're needed. But women will assume they have to have one. Like, it's like the world's worst bouncer. You're not coming in this hospital until you're given a vaginal exam.
That's exactly it.
And we know how dilated you are. But unless your cervix is a crystal ball, what's it telling you? It's not going to tell you how dilated you're going to be in 4 hours or even 10 minutes, because you can go from 3 to 10 in 10 minutes, or it can take 7 hours. So who's it for? It's for the midwives. It's for the system. So they can write down in their charts, women, SROMs, like when your waters break, they write SROM, spontaneous rupture of membranes, 4 centimetres. They have to have charts. They have to have their guidelines written down. They have to have this chain of events. But you can say no. You might want a vaginal exam. You might find it useful.
So, Nickita, we've been speaking for over an hour, almost an hour and a half now. Where can people find you?
When push comes to shove.co.uk.
When push comes to shove.co.uk. And you've written some books as well, haven't you?
I have, yes. I have
Just
written.
gave me some.
I've written When Push Comes to Shove's Guide to the Social Services and How to Navigate the System. And guys, if you're listening, I don't claim to be some sort of prolific author. In fact, I'm very, very dyslexic, but I had to write down what I know so women can be helped. And the other book that you have in your hand, Am I Allowed? That's by Beverly Beach. Before she died, she asked me to take over the book. So I will be writing the 5th edition, and she's asked for all the proceeds to go to my Access Fund. So if you're thinking that you've had a traumatic birth in the past and you don't want that to happen to other women, you can come and train with us. We have 2 different courses. We have a doula course, which is a 4-day intensive course, but it's not just 4 days. You have monthly education webinars after that. We also have a 1-year birth training course called the Artemis Birth Attendant Academy. That's 54 modules, and that's very, very in-depth about physiological birth. We also talk about cranial osteopathy. There's a chiropractor talking on there. We've got acupuncture and self-development, as well as marketing, because we don't want to just train you and leave you. We have to give you the tools to go out and build a business for yourself. If you train with us, you join our directory so we can get you work. We get hundreds of inquiries all around the world. So we can provide you with work. I can't guarantee it, but I can guarantee we get a lot of interest. And we do ask, if we do give you paid work, that you donate 10% back to the Access Fund, to the Beverly Beach Project, so we can continue to serve low-income families for free. And that means if you're asked to go to a birth on the Access Fund, we can pay you your fee. So,
amazing.
Yeah.
Nickita, where can people find you on social media?
On Instagram, I'm when.pushcomestosshove. And on Telegram, I'm Awakened Pregnancy and Birth. And Facebook, I can't even remember offhand, but Twitter, when shove, I think, when shove. I can't remember. Just look up whenpushcomestosshove.co.uk. Go on the website. We've got a new website launching soon. I'm really excited. So what you're going to see when you look it up now, it's not that exciting. It's just a basic page, but we've got an amazing new website being launched. But if you check out the website, all the social media links are there, from Twitter to Telegram to Instagram and Facebook. So, and we have a YouTube channel as well, When Push Comes to Shove. It's myself or other members of When Push Comes to Shove interviewing midwives, even celebrities, and mothers, and me ranting on about several things within the system, from vaginal exams to your waters breaking before labour, so you can get some awesome tips for free. And then if you are pregnant or your wife is pregnant, we have online courses, which is home study. So we've got the Childbirth Preparation Masterclass, which I really recommend you do. We've also got the Navigating the System course for those of you watching who maybe want to have a free birth or a wild pregnancy, so you know exactly how to navigate the system and potential challenges that you might be facing.
Amazing. Listen, it's been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.